All right. So I just thought it was one of those things that I keep bringing up to you guys, like how crazy this timeline is, how dumb this timeline is, right? And I think that like a lot of times you have to have something to see to like kind of remind you what it used to be like during a time that we thought was bad, but in context, in comparison, not even close, right? And a long time ago, I shared the video of John McCain defending Barack Obama when Barack Obama was debating John McCain at a town hall, and or maybe he might not even been there, right? And this old lady said to John McCain, "Isn't he a terrorist?" And John McCain had this really sweet moment where he's like, "Ma'am, like Barack Obama is an American, and Barack Obama is a good man, and if he wins and becomes the president of the United States, he will do a good job. You know, I just think I will be the better candidate for you." And it was like such a beautiful moment, and it just reminds you of, you know, what things used to be like during a time that we really did take for granted, to be fucking honest with you. And you know, like it just sometimes you need that parallel to be drawn. So I saw this video, and it was one that I remembered, but I couldn't find it. And so I saw that Jair Jackson, who I've messed up his name a bunch of times now, Jair Jackson, sorry, playing this video. I saw he had this, and I was like, dude, that's the video I was looking for. So I want to watch this video. This is actually a old Bush interview where he's talking about immigration.
Video that's been floating around. It came across a feed of mine. I think it was maybe on Threads. And it's surprising the way that this guy sounds.
My view is that we are a land of immigrants. And we ought to recognize that. As a matter of fact, I believe America's soul is rejuvenated when people come to our country and work hard to realize dreams. There is an orderly way to have immigration, and that is to recognize people are coming here to do jobs Americans aren't doing, or are not capable of doing, or unwilling to do. And we ought to have a process that enables people to come and do those jobs. It's good for our economy. I think it's, and I think it prevents people from having to sneak in. There are laborers who do jobs people won't do, but there are also incredibly bright students who come. And I think it is a foolhardy policy to limit the number of workers that could contribute, for example, to the productivity of the United States in the internet world. I do believe there will be a rational immigration policy eventually passed. I think there's going to have to be some time. What's interesting about our country, if you study history, is that there are some isms that occasionally pop up. One is isolationism, and its evil twin protectionism, and its evil triplet nativism. So if you study the 20s, for example, there was an American First policy that said, who cares what happens in Europe? Well, what happened in Europe mattered eventually because of World War II. There was Smoot-Hawley, which was a part of an economic policy, which basically said we don't want trade. In other words, let's throw up barriers. And there was an immigration policy that I think during this period argued we had too many Jews and too many Italians, therefore we should have no immigrants. And my point to you is we've been through this kind of period of isolationism, protectionism, nativism. I'm a little concerned that we may be going through the same period. I hope that these isms pass, which would then allow for a more orderly look at immigration policy. But look, I was raised in Texas, and you know, there's a lot of focus on the Hispanic population. I mean, if you're raised in Texas, you understand what it means to interface with Mexican Americans who are Texan, and you realize that we share the same values: faith, family, you know, hard work, commitment to service, and I think we ought to welcome people.
That was George W. Bush.
Yeah, and before Jay gives his point here, I'm just going to say this. I'm not a fan of George Bush Jr. Not a fan of George Bush Sr. I'm pretty sure George Bush Sr. actually is the person who started the H-1B visas. But this is where I diverge, I think, from a lot of people. And that is, like, do I agree with what happened in Iraq? No. 100% no. Do I feel like the lie of there being WMDs in Iraq was manufactured. Yes, I do believe that it was manufactured, and I do think that they lied, and I do think that they found it as an excuse to invade and create connections to Iraq for its oil, as well as stealing a lot of gold and stuff that they took while they were over there. And I also think that it also laid the foundation for what is currently happening in Gaza and Ukraine right now. And so there's a lot that can be said about the Iraq war. And there's a lot that can be said about the other failings of the Bush administration. But I've said this before about conservatives that are center right or traditionally conservative or even libertarian. And that is when it comes to things like immigration, I actually think that we're much closer on our beliefs than they or we think. And that is, I think both sides want a orderly immigration system. And I think that Democrats want it to be one where people that have already been here, that are doing their thing, that are working, that have never committed crimes. And when I say crimes, I mean actual violent crimes. I don't mean fucking jaywalking tickets or bounce checks like Trump is using right now to deport some of these people. But I think that, that they should have a path to amnesty, because that's what we want. We want better people. We want more people. We want people that can, participate and be a part of a healthy society. And to be honest with you, they're probably so much more sane than actual Americans are right now. And, I might not agree with George Bush on a lot of things, but I bet that we could have a conversation on immigration. And not to mention, I also don't think that George Bush Jr. was the actual president. I think Dick Cheney was the president, in my opinion. But, that's a different argument, and there's no reason to make excuses for the failings of that administration. But also something that I think a lot of people don't know is that George Bush Jr. was actually really well read, which is crazy. I found that out during my interview with the guy from Ronald Gruner from who wrote COVID Wars, and that was pretty crazy, because we talked about how George Bush Jr. actually was very aware of the fact that there was a pandemic that was coming. Just so you guys know, George Bush Jr. predicted COVID. It's fucking insane. But that's like, so when I say that, like, we had things so much better during that time, I don't mean that there was nothing bad that was going on. Capitalism has been an issue for a really long time. The effects on the people have been around forever. But I want to point out that I don't think that any person is perfect. I don't think that any person, whether they are left or right, whether they're a politician or their voter, is a perfect human being that has never made any mistakes. I've said this to you guys so many times in my past, is that, like, if you knew me 10 years, 15, 20 years ago, you might not have liked me. Like, my education to being a better person and being a more well-rounded human being has been a process. And even today, during this stream, I probably made at least a couple jokes that people are like, yeah, I don't know if I'm with that. Because growing up doesn't stop. You never stop growing up. You grow up until you die. And so, I want to always remember that when people don't reside on the extremes and choose to have conversation, that's really important. So when I say I think we took for granted that time, I don't mean that I agree with a lot of the stuff that happened during Bush's administration. What I mean is that there was still a way to have conversations about a lot of those things. And those conversations definitely were more tractable and were definitely more simply had. So that's what I mean. I just wanted to make sure before he starts this thing that I said that.
Possibly one of our,
silent, you are perfect. Just yes.
less thinking presidents that we've had. We talked about him when I first started with TYT. That was the guy. That was the focus. That was the guy that started the Iraq War on false pretenses, which they still haven't really talked about in full degree. A guy who also profited off of those wars, who tortured people, and they said it was fine.
Yeah, Jay's actually jumping in here with what Jeremy just said. Like, Jeremy just brought up a lot of things that we could talk about. The Patriot Act, the fact that the Heritage never got hold of the Heritage Foundation, or the fact that the MAGA movement today is the Tea Party of then. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there that can be talked about. Yeah, but even in saying all of that, even just saying all of that, I'm not going to deny that we could have had a conversation over immigration.
To torture. And he's there talking about immigration and the three isms. Isolation and protectionism and nativism. Talked about the America First policy of the 20s. Talked about Smoot-Hawley and the destruction of trade. And talked about this anti-immigration approach and talking about brown people in general, how they shouldn't be othered. This guy who did all those horrible, horrific things, started wars, and honestly, by the way, was a part of the head of the Republican Party that led us to this point of having someone like a Donald Trump in office who's a complete and utter fascist. Yes, it was always headed down that direction. There was hatred towards Muslims. It called everyone that's brown a terrorist. All that stuff happened. And I keep seeing this video float around of George W. Bush talking about the destruction of those isms. And damn it, that dummy who started all that is right.
Yeah, because I think the important thing to say here is what he did surrounding these comments that he made is definably bad for society and for culture, right? But the one thing that he didn't do was what Donald Trump has done. He never took it so far that he encouraged Americans to hate other Americans. He never took it so far that he encouraged people to be racist against immigrants, right? And I do think that that's actually important, even though, like I said, that's critical thinking. Critical thinking is the ability to know that two things are correct and that disagree with each other, right? So you know that on the one hand, the things that he did definitely impacted other cultures and were horrific. And the other thing that's true is that his take on immigration was pretty fucking based. You know, like, there's so many people nowadays that, you know, I don't love the dude. And that's the other thing is, like, that I think people make the mistake of believing that to agree with a person on a single topic, you must love that person, that now you support that person, that now that person is, you know, they are a great part of your ideology. And that's not always true. There's always going to be people that say things that at times sound right that are wrong, and then there's going to be people that are wrong that sometimes sound right that are right? Like, so if you have the people that, like, I fucking find disgusting, like the Russell Brands of the world, do I think he's never said anything that I'd be like, actually that's true? Of course he did. So I think this is what causes people this cognitive dissonance. You know, like, you have to hate the idea because the person that gave it is a person that you hate. And people have to be very careful about that. You know, Jordan Peterson is actually, I believe he was in an ICU, but he's in bad health right now. And he's potentially might die, right? And a lot of people are going to celebrate that. And one of the things I've always told people about Jordan Peterson is I think when he went off the rails, I think he got off his medication. And I once heard, I think it was a leftist mafia, kind of critiquing his book, 12 Steps to Life. I think that book was actually good for young men. I think 12 Steps to Life was pretty simple. It was like, make your bed. It was dumb shit. But one of the funniest things about that book that always cracked me up was the part that gets critiqued the hardest and made fun of the hardest. And yes, it deserved to be made fun of because it was funny and it was a funny example, was he used lobster hierarchy to tell people pretty much, don't be mean to your wife. Don't treat your wife badly. And that's actually a solid fucking thing to say. And I might not like Jordan Peterson. I might not agree with Jordan Peterson on a fucking plethora of subjects. But saying, don't treat your wife like she's the number 10 lobster. I was like, that's pretty fucking based. And then people just went off on making fun of him because he talked about lobsters. But my point is that you don't have to agree with George Bush as a human being to agree that what he had to say about immigration was good.
So it just shows you how quickly someone that was warned about at the time as being someone who was dividing the country, causing it to generate more of this racism, still had these things that he said the right way because he knew that was the basis for how many things really work in this country as far as migration goes. And so people are resharing that and talking about, man, I can't believe George W. Bush said something that sounds smart. It's because look at how quick.
Jamie. That's probably the best way I've ever heard Jordan Peterson described. Jordan Peterson talks to hear himself think out loud. Well, we'd have to say, when you say think, we would need to define what does think mean? I mean, are we talking like a substrate? Are we talking about the thinking, the neural pathways? That is probably the best way I've ever heard somebody explain Jordan Peterson.
We've devalued intelligence, reading, education,
Fucking
and reality.
My friend.
Most specifically, reality in this country. The second that this guy that's in the White House now went down that escalator and went straight into those things that W was talking about. Oh, and W was breaking records for golfing all the time until Donald Trump came in. Just a reminder of who W was, in case you guys see that floating around. You go, man, I can't believe W said some smart things. I was a little bit surprised, too, because I remember we covered a lot on him. But let's not forget how he helped get us here. Smart stuff.
Yeah, but I think that's important to say. But I also think it's important to say there are different levels to shit. And I think that's where people get confused. People get fucked up. Is everything is always the worst when something happens, right? And, you know, I think that it's really important to remember to call things what they are. And I think it's important to not deny when something is correct just because you don't like the messenger. I don't think that does us any good. You know, when I first started doing this a couple of years ago, I said to everybody on the left, I said, when you deny that Joe Biden is old, you're the one who looks stupid. And the argument isn't Joe Biden isn't old. That's undeniable. The argument is that Joe Biden, even though he's old, is still accomplishing more in this country domestically. This was before Israel and Gaza happened. More domestically than any president for the past 30 years, to be fucking honest with you. I mean, yeah, the man couldn't, forgive all college debt, but he did make an attempt to forgive something like $214 billion of it. The dude definitely, knew where the future of industry was going and tried to bring it back to America with semiconductor production through the Chips and Science Act. He steered America through what should have been a recession, and, skipped along right on the surface. Wasn't like fucking any kind of miracle, but it did keep America out of a recession during an incredibly hard time and led America out of a global pandemic, being the number one economy in the world, and had so much fucking force behind it. And it just it's all gone now because some dipshit decided to push all the chips to the middle of the table because he needs it to be about him. It's like, you got to call it what it is. And that was, Joe Biden was old, and Joe Biden didn't do all those things by himself. And Joe Biden had a good administration that made a lot of those things happen. And they also made mistakes. They also did things that they shouldn't have done. But you call it what it is. You call it what it is. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And check out that video on the screen now.